Hello and welcome to this special broadcast, India at BRICS. In the next 2 hours, we'll be getting you all the live updates as far as the Kazan Summit is concerned. And remember, well, earlier today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met Russian President on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. We'll talk about that significant meeting and much more. And they looked at the increasing role of BRICS and how it is playing in the world affairs. They also reviewed the special strategic partnership as far as India and Russia is concerned. We'll be talking about the overarching agenda of the BRICS Summit and everything that India and Russia share. Take a look.
The close ties between India and Russia remain as strong as ever. This was clear during India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS Summit in Kazan. Prime Minister Modi lauded Russia's leadership in BRICS, noting the group's increasing global influence, with several nations eager to join.
मेरे लिए खुशी की बात है कि ब्रिक्स समिट के लिए कजान जैसे खूबसूरत शहर में आने का अवसर मिला है। इस शहर के साथ भारत के गहरे और ऐतिहासिक संबंध रहे हैं। कजान में भारत के नए कॉन्सुलेट के खुलने से ये संबंध और मजबूत होंगे।
The two leaders reviewed the full spectrum of India-Russia relations, focusing on progress made since the last meeting in Moscow. Discussions centered on enhancing cooperation across key sectors and sharing views on critical global issues, including the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
एक्सेलेंसी, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय पर हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। जैसा मैंने पहले भी कहा है, हमारा मानना है कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए। शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली का हम पूरी तरह समर्थन करते हैं। हमारे सभी प्रयास मानवता को प्रमुखता देते हैं। आने वाले समय में भी भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है। एक्सेलेंसी, आज इन सभी विषयों पर विचार साझा करने का एक और महत्वपूर्ण अवसर है।
President Putin reiterated the strategic nature of the India-Russia partnership, emphasizing the importance of cooperation that will need to make important decisions that would strengthen BRICS' functioning and its global role.
We appreciate the ongoing Indo-Russian cooperation as important. Russia and India have a special privileged partnership which keeps growing. We welcome your decision to open Council General in Kazan. The relations between the two nations will improve under your leadership.
Earlier, Prime Minister Modi received a warm welcome from the Indian community in Kazan. The Indian diaspora in Kazan continues to make its mark globally, promoting Indian culture and contributing to various sectors with pride. With inputs from Jessica Taneja, Bureau Report, DD India.
Like we told you earlier, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Kazan on the margins of the 16th BRICS Summit 2024. Prime Minister said, let's take a look at these big takeaways, that India has a deep and historical ties with Kazan. Prime Minister spoke of the opening of the new consulate of India in Kazan, which will further consolidate ties. And Prime Minister also did mention that his 2 visits to Russia in last 3 months reflect the close coordination and deep friendship between India and Russia. Prime Minister added that annual summit held in Moscow in July has strengthened this cooperation further in every field. Prime Minister also noted that BRICS has established distinct identity in past 15 years. While talking about conflict in Ukraine, Prime Minister said that they have been in constant touch on the issue of ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Indian Prime Minister also said that the problems should be resolved through peaceful means. And Prime Minister did mention that India is ready to provide all possible support in the future as well. And let's go live to Kazan in Russia for the briefing by the Ministry of External Affairs there of India.
Let me just give you a quick rundown of the Prime Minister's first day of engagements on the occasion of his visit to Kazan for the 16th BRICS Summit. The Prime Minister arrived in Kazan earlier this morning, and at the airport he was very warmly welcomed by the Rais, or the head of the Republic of Tatarstan, His Excellency Rustam Minikhanov, and the Mayor of Kazan, and was accorded a Guard of Honor. He was also given a traditional Tatar welcome, where he was presented bread and a Tatar dessert, chak-chak, by the local people. India has old historical links with Kazan, a city which lay on an ancient trade route. On his arrival at the hotel, the Prime Minister was greeted by members of the Indian community in Kazan. We also had members of the local ISKCON branch singing Sanskrit chants to welcome him, and a group of Russian artists performed Kathak and Garba dances on the occasion. Thereafter, Prime Minister witnessed a photo exhibition on Mahatma Gandhi that highlighted the Mahatma's engagement with Leo Tolstoy. And this is particularly significant as it was in Kazan that Leo Tolstoy studied for several years. The Prime Minister's first formal engagement of the day was a bilateral meeting with President Vladimir Putin, the host of the 16th BRICS Summit. The meeting took place in the Governor's Palace, and the two leaders discussed the progress made in bilateral relations since the 22nd annual summit between them, which was held in July this year in Moscow. This happens to be the Prime Minister's 7th visit to Russia over the last 10 years, and his second visit to Russia this year. The two leaders had an extensive agenda to go over, the whole range of bilateral issues, including trade, economic, energy, defense, connectivity, education, and people-to-people ties were discussed between the two of them. Regional and global issues of mutual concern also came up for discussion. The two leaders also exchanged views on several matters concerning BRICS, and President Putin expressed his appreciation for India's constructive attitude and contributions in concluding the documents related to the Kazan BRICS Summit. The leaders also shared perspectives on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Prime Minister reiterated that dialogue and diplomacy was the way forward to achieve resolution of the conflict. He briefed President Putin about his engagements with the Ukrainian leadership, and noted that India stood ready to contribute in bringing peace to the region. An important issue that came up was the issue of early discharge of the remaining Indian nationals in the Russian army. This figured from both sides in the discussion, and with the support of the Russian side, a number of Indian nationals have in recent months been able to return to India. We understand that currently the embassy is pursuing around 20 cases with the Russian side, and we very much hope that all of these individuals can be released at an early date and be repatriated to India very soon. The two sides also expressed satisfaction at the ongoing defense cooperation and agreed to hold the next meeting of the India-Russia Intergovernmental Cooperation Group on Defense Cooperation in Moscow at an early date. On energy cooperation, in which there is engagement between India and Russia on building nuclear power plants in India, it was agreed that the Department of Atomic Energy and the Russian agency Rosatom would continue to remain in touch to adhere to the mutually agreed schedule for the installation of the remaining units, that is units 3 to 6 of the Kudankulam nuclear power project. Economic cooperation figured quite prominently in the talks, and the two sides discussed the possibility of further cooperation in the financial sector. Sustaining supply chains for the steady and regular sourcing of fertilizers and coal from Russia was also discussed, and President Putin promised assistance in this regard as well. As agreed by the two leaders at their 22nd annual summit earlier this year, India will host the 25th session of the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Technical, Economic and Cultural Cooperation in New Delhi on the 12th of November 2024, for which the Russian delegation will be led by Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov. And as I had pointed out just a couple of days ago as well, India is at this time working with the Russian side to open a new consulate right here in Kazan in the not too distant future. Another new consulate that was announced some time back will be opened in Yekaterinburg. The Prime Minister's next engagement, which got over a short while ago, was a meeting with the newly elected President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, His Excellency Dr. Masoud Pezeshkian. Prime Minister and President Pezeshkian had a fruitful discussion. This was their first meeting since President Pezeshkian's election as the 9th President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Prime Minister congratulated him on his recent victory and reaffirmed India's commitment to deepening the age-old bilateral ties with Iran. In fact, both leaders emphasized repeatedly the shared historical and civilizational ties that underpin their bilateral relations and discussed ways to further strengthen cooperation in various fields of bilateral ties. The discussion focused on key areas of cooperation, particularly the Chabahar port and the international north-south transport corridor, which are crucial for enhancing regional connectivity and economic partnerships. In fact, seamless connectivity in the region was a theme of this meeting. In this context, the recent signing of the long-term main contract for the development of the Chabahar port in Iran further strengthens the commitments of both countries toward collaboration in these sectors, which is in a sense also significant for the reconstruction and development of Afghanistan and for enhancing trade, economic and people-to-people linkages with the countries of Central Asia. Both leaders also discussed the situation in West Asia. Prime Minister expressed his deep concern over the escalating conflict and reiterated India's call for the protection of civilians, the prevention of harm to civilians. He emphasized the need for dialogue and diplomacy to de-escalate tensions. President Pezeshkian also emphasized on the need for peace and harmony in the region and the role that India could play in de-escalating the conflict given its good relations with all the parties involved. As I said, Afghanistan was another key topic of discussion between the leaders. Both of them underscored the importance of maintaining peace and stability in the region, along with continuing humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. President Pezeshkian acknowledged in particular the role that India played in Iran's accession to both the SCO and BRICS, and both the leaders agreed to continue their cooperation within various multilateral platforms, including BRICS and SCO. These are the developments for the day today. The Prime Minister is going to leave in a short while for the exclusive leaders dinner being hosted for BRICS leaders by President Putin. And we'll brief you on tomorrow's developments as the BRICS Summit opens at a time that will be notified later. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Siddhant.
Hi, sir. Siddhant from WION. Sir, any possibility of a bilateral between the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President, given that there is a certain level of thaw with the agreement on petroling? And essentially, my second question, what will be India's focus at the BRICS Summit this year in terms of the expansion, in terms of alternate payments mechanism?
Sahil.
Sir, I'm Sahil from ANI. Sir, just a quick clarification regarding what you said about petroling yesterday as a part of the agreement reached, and what will be it entail under new agreement, and what are the implications for the agreement on disengagement reached previously?
Ranjan.
Ranjan Sharma, RT. My question is about the bilateral between the Indian Prime Minister and the Russian President. Was Ukraine discussed at all as a follow-up of Prime Minister's last visit, as it suggested that India sought to be a peacemaker? Any developments there?
Vishal.
सर, मैं विशाल पांडे हूं एबीपी न्यूज से। मेरा सवाल ये है कि क्या 2020 से पहले की जो स्थिति एलएसी पर थी उसी पर लौटने की सहमति बन चुकी है, और क्या कल भारत के प्रधानमंत्री और चीन के राष्ट्रपति के बीच द्विपक्षीय मुलाकात होगी?
We'll come back to the question.
Okay. Let me take. Siddhant, yes, I can. Sorry. Yeah, I can confirm that there will be a bilateral meeting held between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping tomorrow, 23rd of October, on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. The exact time and other logistics are being worked out, but the meeting will take place tomorrow. Let me address Runjun's question about the subject of Ukraine in the meeting between Prime Minister and President Putin. As I said, there was a considerable amount of discussion on this subject. The Prime Minister reiterated his views and his understanding that war and conflict would not solve or yield any solutions. The battlefield would not yield any solutions. There was a need for direct engagement between the parties most directly involved in the conflict, but also that India stood ready to aid and assist in any manner possible. It is in this context that starting from the Prime Minister's visit to Moscow in July this year, subsequently going on to his visit to Kyiv in August this year, his engagement with the leadership of both countries, as well as other regional powers and other countries that are interested in it, the involvement of the National Security Advisor, who briefed the President of Russia during his visit to St. Petersburg. All of these are, and most recently, I may have mentioned the Prime Minister's meeting with President Zelensky on the sidelines of the UNGA in New York. All of these signify India's attempt to continue to remain in touch with key actors, key interlocutors, and gauge the possibility of finding a peaceful path to end the conflict, and also perhaps look for alternative approaches that may not currently be on the table or may not be currently under examination by the two parties. I think we will continue to stay in touch with all parties, given that we are amongst the few interlocutors that have the comfort and the ability to speak on all sides, or speak with actors on all sides of the conflict. And as I may have said earlier, the President Putin, appreciated the role that India was playing, and promised to stay in close touch with Prime Minister in connection with India's efforts. Sahil and Vishal, I think your questions essentially relate to the same point with regard to the clarification that you sought insofar as what patrolling will entail under the agreement that was reached yesterday. Well, what it will entail is that in the pending areas under discussion, patrolling and indeed grazing activities, wherever applicable, will revert to the situation as it obtained in 2020. Incidentally, I should say that this is also what the External Affairs Minister was talking about yesterday when he was speaking at the NDTV World Summit, I think. And as to the other part of your question, what the as far as the disengagement agreements reached previously are concerned, those agreements were not reopened in these discussions. The agreement that was reached yesterday, very early yesterday morning, was focused on issues that had remained outstanding in the last couple of years. So that is what I would say at this point in time. विशाल, ये आपके सवाल का, आपके प्रश्न का भी उत्तर इसमें है. जैसे मैंने कहा कि जो आपने सवाल पूछा था कि पेट्रोलिंग पे जो समझौता कल हुआ है, उसके माने क्या है, तो उसके माने ये हैं कि जो कुछ सवाल रह गए थे जिनके बारे में पिछले 2 साल से बातचीत चल रही थी, तो वहाँ पे पेट्रोलिंग और ग्रेजिंग जहाँ पे भी वो लागू हो, तो वो वाली जो स्थिति है वो 2020 की स्थिति वहाँ पे बहाल हो जाएगी. और मैं ये भी कह रहा था कि कल जब विदेश मंत्री एनडीटीवी वर्ल्ड समिट के मौके पे बोल रहे थे तो उनका तात्पर्य भी इसी से था. और जो मेरे ख्याल से साहिल का प्रश्न था ये भी कि जो पहले अग्रीमेंट्स हुई हैं उस पे क्या असर पड़ेगा कल की अग्रीमेंट का, तो जो पहले की अग्रीमेंट्स है उसके बारे में इन जो अभी चर्चा समाप्त हुई है उसमें पहले की अग्रीमेंट्स को फिर से हमने खोला नहीं. ये चर्चा जो थी ये पेंडिंग अग्रीमेंट्स पे जो आउटस्टैंडिंग इश्यूज थे उनको लेके थी.
Manish Chand, India Rights Network. Foreign Secretary, this will be the first structured meeting, probably, the first structured meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping since the Galwan clashes. Yeah. Now, will it lead to, I mean, what is the assumption on which we are going ahead? Will it lead to a revival of the dialogue process? Because there were, as far as I remember, there are more than 20 theme-specific, sector-specific dialogue before the relations were disrupted. That's number one. Number two, on meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, I believe expansion of the grouping was discussed. What is your view on the candidacies of, say, for example, Turkey and Pakistan, and the broad big picture, how we are approaching, because there are a lot of competing narratives about the expansion. Thank you.
सर नमस्कार, मेरा नाम आरेंद्र है, मैं दूरदर्शन न्यूज से हूं और मेरा दो सवाल है सर। पहला ये कि जो चीन के साथ में पेट्रोलिंग की पुरानी व्यवस्था को लागू करने पर सहमति बनी है, क्या उसको लेकर कोई समय सीमा भी है कि उसको कब तक लागू किया जाएगा? मेरा दूसरा सवाल इस बात को लेकर है कि ईरान के राष्ट्रपति के साथ जो मुलाकात हुई है प्रधानमंत्री मोदी की, वेस्ट एशिया में जो संघर्ष जो बढ़ता हुआ नजर आ रहा है, उसमें शांति स्थापना को लेकर किस प्रकार के बिंदुओं पर बात हुई और भारत के इन शांति के प्रयासों में किसी प्रकार के रोल को लेकर अगर कोई बात हुई, थोड़ा उस पर विस्तार चाहेंगे। थैंक यू सर।
Sir, Dhairya Maheshwari from Sputnik India. Sir, with regards to the meeting with the Iranian president, would it be possible to know if there was a discussion on linking the Chabahar port to the INSTC? And what are the challenges we are facing, in doing so? And sir, on the meeting with President Putin, sir, was there any word on the revival of the RIC format? I mean, from the Russian side, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Valentina Schwartzman, RBC. Could you please comment on the Bloomberg report saying that India opposes a new expansion of BRICS, fearing that it might become sort of an anti-US body? And also, additionally, could you please say whether there has been any progress on the issue of the accumulation of rupees in India's banks as the result of proceeds from the deals with Russia? Has this issue been resolved in any way? And how much of these rupees still remain in Indian banks? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I missed answering one of Siddhant's questions from the earlier lot about the focus in the BRICS summit. So yes, as you said, I think one of the focus areas is, I wouldn't say the expansion of BRICS, but what we are discussing right now, which is the modalities and guidelines for implementing a partner country model with BRICS. So that is one of the focus areas for this summit. Beyond that, of course, I would imagine that there will be a lot of discussions between the leaders on the key themes and the key vectors within BRICS on political and strategic issues, on economic, trade and financial issues, and on people-to-people and cultural relations. I don't want to preempt and prejudge what will be the actual outcomes of the summit tomorrow. And my colleague, Secretary Economic Relations, will be here at some point tomorrow to brief you on BRICS in detail. And that will include the developments with regard to alternative payment mechanisms, etc., which are all being discussed in the BRICS task force on payments, which has 3 or 4 different streams working within it. Manish, you asked about what will the meeting between Prime Minister and President lead to. I think I can only ask you at this moment to be patient. I will not be able to preempt or preview the outcome of the meeting, but we should hopefully have some details to offer tomorrow. With regard to discussions between Prime Minister and President Putin on some of the issues that are being discussed in BRICS on membership, as I said, there is a partner country model that is under discussion. The guidelines, modalities, and the parameters of this model are under discussion. As I am given to understand, this is something that is still a work in progress at this point in time, so I don't want to go beyond my brief and comment on something that is still under discussion. Again, there might be developments later today or tomorrow that it would be more appropriate to speak about these at that point. Haren, your question on आपने पूछा था कि इसमें कोई टाइम लिमिट है क्या जो समझौता हुआ है. समझौते के कई पहलू हैं जो एक तो डिप्लोमेटिक लेवल पे जो बातचीत हुई है, फॉर मिलिट्री लेवल पे बातचीत हुई है, इन सभी चीज़ों को समझौते में रखा गया है और आने वाले दिनों में आपको इसके बारे में और डिटेल्स मिल सकती हैं, लेकिन अभी मैं इससे ज़्यादा नहीं कहना चाहूँगा. जहाँ तक ईरान के साथ जो प्रधानमंत्री जी की राष्ट्रपति पेजेश्कियान से बातचीत हुई है, जी हाँ, शांति वार्ता या शांति वार्ता की जो आवश्यकता है पश्चिमी एशिया में, उसके बारे में काफ़ी गहरी बातचीत हुई उनसे. ईरान के राष्ट्रपति ने जोर दिया इस बात पे कि वे शांति वार्ता के और शांति के पक्ष में हैं, और प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी ने उनसे कहा कि भारत हमेशा से शांति चाहता आ रहा है, और चूंकि भारत की इस क्षेत्र में जितने देश हैं, और उन्होंने 6-7 देशों के नाम गिनाए और उनके लीडर्स के साथ जो उनकी बातचीत हुई है उसके बारे में थोड़ा उन्होंने ब्यौरा दिया और बताया कि कैसे वो शांति वार्ता के पक्ष में सभी लीडर्स से बातचीत समय समय पे करते आ रहे हैं, और भारत एक तरह से ये भूमिका कई साल से निभाता आ रहा है और आगे भी निभाएगा. Dhari, your question on linking Chabahar and INSTC, yes, this has been something that has been a subject of discussion for some time. There are certain logistical issues involved in it, but I don't think that as a principle there is any question about the utility and the value that would be derived by linking Chabahar to the INSTC. It is something that we have discussed with a number of interlocutors, but there are certain logistics and infrastructure issues that are involved in this. Having earlier this year signed the main contract on Chabahar between Iran and India, I would imagine that movement towards this objective would be possible in the not too distant future. Your second question on the revival of Russia, India, China trilateral in the meeting with President Putin, no, this did not come up in today's meeting. I think there was a question on, if I got you correctly, that there is an impression that India opposes BRICS expansion. I think that is a completely misplaced and erroneous impression. Last year, when BRICS was expanded, we were very much in the middle of that exercise and very, very closely involved in that exercise. And the very fact that practically every country that entered as a member of BRICS last year has expressed their appreciation to India for the role that we played only goes to testify what our stance with regard to BRICS expansion is. And I might add that it's the same role that we are playing in terms of contributing constructively to the discussions around the BRICS partner country discussion that is going on. About your question on rupees in Indian banks, I don't have the details immediately with me in terms of the quantum, but yes, these balances are there in special Vostro accounts that have been created under RBI regulations, and they are essentially aimed at enabling the trade between India and Russia to proceed in a smooth manner. But I think the details, perhaps when Secretary Economic Relations is here tomorrow, he might be able to give you more details on this.
We had a question there. Yeah, please.
Foreign Secretary, my name is Pavel Tsukanov. I'm from the Russian TASS news agency. Recently, the BRICS pay mechanism was introduced. In this regard, my question is, 1, can it be considered a viable alternative to the SWIFT interbank messaging system? 2, will India participate in this initiative? And if so, do you believe it could soon facilitate settlements in bilateral trade, such as for energy resources? Thank you.
Gaurav?
सर नमस्कार, मेरा नाम गौरव सावंत है. आई वर्क फॉर इंडिया टुडे एंड आज तक. सर, चीन के रुख में ये परिवर्तन आया कैसे आपकी दृष्टि में, और जब पेट्रोलिंग दोबारा रिज्यूम होगी तो फिर बॉर्डर पे ट्रूप्स के क्लैशेस ना हो जाए, क्या इसका भी कोई मैकेनिज्म है? और डिसएंगेजमेंट तो हो रहा है, क्या डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की भी बात हो रही है?
Kadamni, you had a question? No. Sir.
So, to your question on, if I got you correctly, spoke about BRICS payment mechanism having been introduced. I must confess I'm not aware of an alternative payment mechanism having been introduced, as especially insofar as, if I take the second part of your question, especially as an alternative to SWIFT. What I do know is that there are some discussions that are going on within BRICS in terms of local currency settlement of trade. This is something that we have encouraged, and in the discussions between officials on the finance track within BRICS, this is something that has been discussed as a possibility. And to start with, I think this might be something that could happen bilaterally between BRICS partners and could slowly be expanded to the multilateral plane amongst the BRICS countries, thus limited thus far to trade. How it can move to other areas of financial engagement between BRICS countries is something that I understand is still under study. There are a number of research projects that have been commissioned into these areas, because as you will understand, it entails it would entail a number of changes in the financial mechanism and financial infrastructure of the different BRICS countries. So insofar as the local currency settlement of trade-related issues is concerned, yes, that is something that is being discussed and encouraged within BRICS. But beyond that, I think we still have some work to do. Gaurav, आपका जो सवाल है कि ये रुख कैसे बदला, how did these things change? मेरे विचार में ये सवाल इस समय थोड़ा सा प्रीमेच्योर है. अभी जो अरेंजमेंट्स और अभी तक जो समझौता हुआ है उसे पहले हमें ग्राउंड पे इम्प्लीमेंट करना है. ये एनालिसिस कि ये कैसे हुआ, इसको मेरे विचार में बाद में देख सकते हैं. आपने कहा कि जो आगे फेस ऑफ्स न हो, क्लैशेस न हो, उनको कैसे रोका जाए. मेरे विचार में बहुत ही ये एक अहम आपने सवाल, एक अहम मुद्दा उठाया है, और हमारी आशा है और हमारा प्रयत्न रहेगा कि जो अरेंजमेंट्स वर्कआउट हुए हैं, जिन पे समझौता हुआ है, वो ऐसे अरेंजमेंट्स हो जिनसे इस तरह के क्लैशेस रुक सकें जो पीछे हुए हैं कहीं कहीं पे लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल के पास. तो इसमें आगे हमें देखना पड़ेगा और लगातार प्रयत्न करना पड़ेगा, लगातार कोशिश करनी पड़ेगी कि जो मैकेनिक्स हो जो अग्रीमेंट के, वो ऐसे रहें कि इस तरह के जो क्लैशेस हैं उनको रोका जा सके. जहाँ तक आपका अंतिम प्रश्न है कि डिसएंगेजमेंट हो गया है या हो रहा है, और de-escalation और de-induction की बात कहाँ आती है, मैं फिर से यही कहूँगा कि अभी हमें पहले disengagement पे focus करना है और de-escalation और de-induction की बातें सही समय पे होंगी. Thank you all.
With that, we come to the closure of this session. Thank you very much for your presence, and thank you, sir, for taking out time for our friends in the media. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Those were live visuals from Kazan, the presser or the briefing, media briefing by the Ministry of External Affairs of India, convened by Foreign Secretary of India, Vikram Misri. Just to quickly reiterate, as we also welcome our special guest on this very special broadcast, Foreign Secretary did give an overview of the contents of discussions that came up between Prime Minister Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Remember, earlier today they met on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS Summit, and Foreign Secretary also did take questions. There were more questions rather pertaining to whether Ukraine-Russia conflict did figure as far as the discussions or the meeting between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi is concerned, and most importantly, that yes, there's going to be that all-important bilateral between Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping tomorrow. Responding to the questions on the de-escalation and the engagements as far as the patrolling at the LAC is concerned, Foreign Secretary did mention that patrolling at the LAC will revert to its original position in 2020. We're going to talk about all of that, and there was a considerable discussion as far as President Putin and Prime Minister Modi is concerned on Ukraine, where Prime Minister Modi of India reiterated India's position that the solutions cannot be, or battlefields cannot really offer solutions, and there is definitely a need for the direct engagements as far as the leadership of Russia and Ukraine is concerned, that how India stood strongly and ready to aid and assist if at all necessary, where Prime Minister Modi also recalled his visit to Moscow just 3 months ago, which was followed by his visit to Kyiv in Ukraine, and how India has maintained a considerable level of engagements as far as the other regional players or regional powers are concerned, and how India really looks at the attempt to gauge the possibility for looking for quote-unquote alternative approaches as far as resolving the Russia-Ukraine conflict or Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned. Pretty much questions pertaining to the Prime Minister Modi's bilateral with Xi Jinping and the significance of President Putin's meeting with Prime Minister Modi. And yes, of course, Prime Minister Modi's bilateral with the Iranian top leadership, the Iranian president. India describing that meeting also fruitful, and he did elaborate on how Chabahar and other things also came up for the discussion. And I'm going to quickly take this opportunity because we need to now get our guests involved in this discussion and talk about all the big takeaways of this press briefing by Foreign Secretary of India in Kazan. Let me quickly welcome on this special broadcast Ambassador Prabhu Dayal in our Delhi studio. Also welcoming, in our Delhi studio, Dr. Swasti Rao, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, of course, former senior diplomat. Swasti Rao, Dr. Swasti Rao, Associate Fellow with IDSA. Such a pleasure talking to you, Swasti. Finally, you're here in our studio today. And such a warm, it's such a pleasure to have Greg Simons joining us all the way live from Sweden. He's the Associate Professor in Tureba University in Latvia and very renowned global voice and research scholar in geopolitics, especially in matters pertaining to Russia and Europe, live from Sweden. Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much. I would like to quickly start with our senior most diplomat sitting in our Delhi studio, former diplomat rather. Sir, very quickly, what do you make of it? Two parts to my first question. The opening remarks as far as Prime Minister Modi and Russian President are concerned earlier today, and the India's position. Not that the solutions will be not offered in the battlefield, but dialogue. Well, that's what our position has been. But we have gone a little further on talking about mediation. Though this is not an overarching agenda of the BRICS Summit, we'll touch upon that as well. But what do you make of the bigger takeaways of the recently concluded presser? Because that is something you would agree sets the tone as far as what India brings to the table and why this BRICS Summit is significant for India. Ambassador.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show.
Pleasure, sir.
You know, India always has emphasized that it is not an era of war. India has been very categorical in saying that there is a need to bring peace in the Russia-Ukraine war and to also bring peace in other conflict areas like the Middle East. So as far as your question relating to our position regarding this very, very devastating war going on between Russia and Ukraine, I think Prime Minister once again stated his belief in the fact that dialogue and diplomacy are needed and that there is no possibility of war leading to any sort of solutions. I think President Putin has himself realized the important role that India can play. I read somewhere that President Putin said that he can't set a timeline, but he did indicate his interest in ending the war, and he mentioned that India, China and Brazil could be three countries which could play a role in facilitating a solution. Now to the other question about what, for instance, an organization like BRICS means to India. India believes in multi-alignment. India believes in being friends with as many countries as possible and likewise being a part of as many multilateral organizations that matter. That is why we are members of Quad. At the same time, we are members of BRICS and SCO. India has been invited for several years as a guest country in the G7, and of course, we were the president of the G20 last year. So all this emphasizes that India believes in multi-alignments and keeping relationships with as many countries open, not just bilaterally, but in multilateral settings also. And there are lots of questions which had begun to be asked regarding India's closeness to the Western group. For instance, that India is a member of the Quad and that Quad is being perceived as an anti-China front. But Prime Minister Modi had made it very clear at the last meeting of the Quad, which was held in the United States, that Quad, as he sees it, is not directed against any country. And India doesn't want to use its association with other countries to target some other countries. In other words, we want to be even-handed and we want to be friends with as many countries as possible. And we see our interaction at multilateral gatherings such as BRICS and again such as Quad and SCO as being fora where we interact with other countries which matter in the global system and thereby try to find solutions to global problems such as the ones I mentioned earlier, the one in the Middle East, the Russia-Ukraine war, the global crisis relating to the climate, economic issues, and so on and so forth. But the main point is that Prime Minister Modi has always emphasized on his belief in one world, one family, one future, and our participation in all these fora also underlines that very aspect.
Okay, Swasti, so having said that, what does India bring to the table? And BRICS needs India as much as India would want a consolidated alignment with the BRICS members, considering we've been one of the founding members and this is for the first time that you have additional members also there, especially the kind of engagements we have had with, of course, the bilateral with Iran, and we've engaged with Cairo and UAE, well, Ethiopia, not that much, but then in this new settings, you know, in this rubric, where do you see India under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi?
So, good evening to you, Sakal, and thanks for the question. So, with respect to your question about where do I see India, of course, we are actually in the middle of India's global intersectional moment, where I think Ambassador Dayal was just elaborating how India is actually the true bridge between East and West and North and South, perhaps at a time when the global bifurcation and all the contestation is sort of, you know, going, I mean, increasing by the day. India, of course, gives gives everybody this light and hope that indeed there can be countries that can be friends with everybody, that do not believe in escalating tensions, etc. Now, with respect to BRICS particularly, of course, India's multi-alignment is a key factor out there. India, like just now the Foreign Secretary was also mentioning that India believes in supporting BRICS expansion as long as it is reflective of the true spirit of the BRICS countries. And if you look at its most basic and fundamental, BRICS is actually coming from the RIC triangle, of course, of the 90s, and that was a different time of geopolitics, but eventually it has evolved into a grouping of developing economies, and also those economies that want to provide a kind of an alternative to the global Western-led, economic order. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that everything about BRICS and everything about BRICS expansion or India's participation is completely hunky-dory. And I think there were certain issues that obviously had come up, and the point and the proof of the pudding, in my opinion, is about how well can we form a consensus to actually resolve those issues. One of those issues could be about how to settle payments in local currencies, because that is something which is a huge attraction for a lot of countries who wish to join BRICS today, because in a very, very uncertain world, Sakal, they actually want to consequentially hedge their bets and keep their options open, which is a very, very legit, foreign policy aspiration to have. So that's one part. The other part is about how do you actually lend more and more credibility and visibility to the new development bank, which is an alternative form of, lending, which has come up in BRICS. And similarly, so on and so forth, like everybody is mentioning, BRICS is not really an anti-Western, multilateral organization from India's perspective, but it is a non-Western kind of an organization which India uses to basically have the leadership of the global South, and also to basically, like I said initially, to bridge this divide between North and the global South.
Yes. So India as an important bridge in global North and global South, and the optics of India as a bridge between the Western parts, Western groupings like the Quad and the non-Western forums. Swasti, this thought, I just want to quickly have Greg's impression on this, and after that we'll go live to our correspondent Jessica on the overall, overall takeaways of the briefing. But Greg, quickly, what do you make of it? India's rise in the BRICS scheme of things, or especially in the current BRICS scheme of things. Greg Simon. Can we go to Greg's, please? Okay, let's well, that question was for Greg Simon, but nevertheless, we can go to Greg a little later. Meanwhile, Jessica is joining us live from Kazan. Jessica, over to you. Big takeaways on the presser, particularly the questions related to this important bilateral between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi tomorrow, and the engagements and the and all the questions that were pertaining to the disengagement at the LAC, etc.
That's correct. A big development has come out of this presser from the Foreign Secretary this evening here in Kazan, Sakal, with the fact that the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping will hold a bilateral meeting tomorrow. We're given to understand the second half of the summit is going to be of particular significance and importance. You've seen in the recent past, we've heard from the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, as well about the disengagement and the patrolling points that have been agreed upon. And right now, we were told by the Foreign Secretary that the reverse, which was back in 2020, when it comes to grazing and patrolling points, we could see that, and that in itself is a big development. Now, the two leaders will be meeting, holding a bilateral talk after ever since 2020. They did meet on the sidelines of BRICS last year, and before that, but there were no bilateral talks. So this certainly is significant in terms of India-China relationship, and also talking about disengagement. While the Foreign Secretary was cautious about pointing out that we should wait for the outcomes of the meeting between the two tomorrow and look for more details there, but it is an important development both for the Indian and the Chinese side that a bilateral meeting will be held today. Is certainly a breakthrough that was expected, and now it has been formalized.
Jessica, we'll try and come to you a bit later, maybe in few seconds. We need to fix that audio snag there. Meanwhile, can we go to live across to Sweden and Greg Simon joining us live from there? Greg, what, according to you, is going to be India's role under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi as far as the agenda setting of the 16th edition of BRICS under the chairmanship of Russia is concerned on the sidelines of the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Greg.
There are many things to discuss, and I mean, you have got a wide range. What BRICS is in effect becoming, it's the geoeconomic arm of the Global South's geopolitical course, or its intended course. So, I mean, it is an absolutely essential part of that to ensure that the Global South, which India is an important part, remains a subject of international relations and doesn't become an object of the so-called rules-based order, which does not really benefit anyone besides the rules-based order. Now, I mean, there are many different things to go through, including international payments and the such likes as alternative to SWIFT, and so forth. And this is not only due to what the Global South is doing, but it's also due to the US-led rules-based order, which is weaponizing currency. It's waging economic warfare on anyone and everyone, friend and foe, in order to turn them into objects of these geopolitics, which is intended because it's a declining hegemon, and they want to stay afloat, and they will use anyone to do that. And this makes BRICS a very important part to ensure that sovereignty and national interest is maintained in a reciprocal and a relational manner between those countries making up BRICS.
So, do you see this BRICS coming up as an alternate to these global bodies that you're talking about, or perhaps breaking the hegemony of these global bodies where India's voice will matter more, because there is this growing narrative of India bridging the global north, the global south and the west as well?
Certainly. I mean, you can see the likes of G7 becoming increasingly irrelevant. And one of the reasons for that is because they're a bloc against someone. I mean, this is what your other guests have been saying.
Right.
That BRICS is not against anyone. It's not being weaponized and used against someone, but it's inclusive. And it's respecting all parties. And I think this approach is appealing, because not only did you have the big increase in numbers recently, but other countries are flooding to join BRICS. And this is the best testimony of all. And there needs to be a global institution that is out of the control of this so-called rules-based order, so other parties can have their interests and their voices heard as equal.
Yes. I want to take this thought to Ambassador Tayals. You know, there are reportedly over 40 countries, including Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arabs, and I have the list. Well, we have Argentina, Algeria, Bolivia, Indonesia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Comoros, Gabon, Kazakhstan. They've all expressed their willingness to join the forum. Do you think this membership will unlock these the benefits, including the development finance and increase in trade and investment for these countries? It's going to take time. But what India did under its presidency during G20, the inclusion of African presidency, we can get to see something like this here. I mean, there's a lot of expectations from India in the BRICS grouping.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
But I think we have to be a little careful when it comes to the expansion of BRICS, because we shouldn't dilute quality in the interest of quantity. What has been mentioned during the briefing by the Foreign Secretary was very important, that we have to fine-tune the criteria for partner countries. And first, let us have more partner countries, let them settle in, and let them show that they would be very useful to BRICS as member states. As partner countries, they would be able to get benefits through BRICS. But membership entails more responsibilities. So in my view, it is good to have more partner countries, but since we have so many applicants for membership, we have to see which of these are fulfilling the role as partner countries responsibly and usefully, which of these are making good contribution to the functioning of BRICS, and then decide which of those should be given full BRICS membership.
Swasti?
Yeah, so see, we have to understand the fundamental problem here, which is that when you talk about G20, G20 is basically put together for actually tackling financial issues, right? It is about reforms in the banking sector. It came out of a particular context, which was that there was a crisis in the, in the Western banks, etc., which kind of percolated down to the rest of the world. And then eventually it was realized that if you really want to save the world from these kind of crises, you basically require a kind of a financial consensus as to what would be the standards of giving loans, what would be the standards of banking, etc., which are also referred to as Basel, reforms. So while in the G20, of course, over the years the mandate has expanded, but at its core, it is basically about global financial architecture. When it comes to BRICS, BRICS is more of a strategic, grouping. Now, over the years, we have seen that it's becoming more and more economic, because there are talks about trying to have more NDB, which is a lending mechanism. Yes, so, of course, CRA. That's that's CRA, of course, NDB and CRA. And then also now, there are discussions about settling trade in local currencies, because, of course, everybody understands that why should a third country be suffer the sanctions where it has no role. But having said that, we have to understand that BRICS still does not really have a common economic program. I mean, if you carefully see, right now the kind of, until the expansion had happened, BRICS economies are basically dominated by China. And one of the reasons why India remains in these groupings, also Sakal, is because India does not wish that these kind of multilateral groupings, which are essentially non-Western in nature, which obviously are a big aspiration now for the global South countries, actually fall completely into the lap of China. Because let's be honest, I mean, China does not want, the rise of India. It does not look at the rise of India in the same way. And India is wary of an Asian order and an Indo-Pacific order, which is led by China. And of course, we have different ways of expressing it. India doesn't believe in territorial, so to say, invasion, for example, like China does. But at the same time, that these are, there are tensions. And one of the reasons why, for example, the BRICS currency is not going to happen, even though it is such a popular sentiment in the global South, at least, is because when you look at the BRICS currency, ultimately it is going to be decided by the size of the respective economy, and then eventually it will again be a currency which is going to be dominated by China. So the caveat here is that if we are looking for trade which is not settled in dollars, then are we tightening China's grip over that de-dollarized trade? And as long as you have these kind of issues remaining, of course there are other issues too, which is that Chinese currency is not really a free-floating currency, but those are other issues. The thing is that we do have certain problems when it comes to having a common economic program, and that is why I feel that if you really look at its core, BRICS should be really working more at the NDB and the CRA, because that is where we can really lead the global order, and in a way an alternative lending instrument, because so far, of course, we have one which is dominated by China, we have one which is dominated by West, but one that has the participation of the global South, to make it more equitable.
So your CRA and NDB, have they really managed to compete with the World Banks of the world and the International Monetary Funds of the world? Well, that's a different question completely. Yes. But let me go across live once again to Sweden and take this, the question, Greg, about the economic heft that the BRICS Plus nations bring to the table. They account for the world's half of the world's population and 2/5 of the trade. That includes your two major energy producers. 12 more nations are on the pipeline to join. How do you see this? The economic heft of the group, BRICS nations plus.
Yes, well, I mean, this has been causing G7 and so forth a lot of angst because they considered themselves unassailable. And now BRICS is rapidly gaining strength. Because if we remember, even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the West did not really take BRICS seriously. Now it considers that BRICS is a geoeconomic threat. But of course, this West has been exploiting the global South. So you've got this issue where the global South wants to protect its economic interests and its resources and so forth. And hence, this economic factor is playing a massive part in it. Because, I mean, you can see, for example, even in the African continent, those who are throwing off the vestiges of these hangover of economic imperialism of France and so forth. So this is going to continue to play an important role. And of course, when you get under this, you lose your economic sovereignty, it's a huge problem. I mean, India, of course, suffered that over a couple of centuries, and this affects all aspects of life and for a considerable period of time, including the after effects.
Okay, so having said that, how do you see this in terms of balance of power, simply put, between the East and the West?
Well, this is a careful thing because, I mean, BRICS is about consensus. And so the more members you have, the more different opinions and different interests you're going to have. So it's going to be quite a difficult balance to play because you have to it's on an equal basis, your say in this. So looking at that, I mean, this is what your other two guests have been saying. In order to expand BRICS, you need to be very careful and do it with great deal of care, attention, and over a long period of time rather than a rapid expansion. And this is the key, to have this solid foundation where the equality remains, the consensus remains, but you don't get...
Where is this going? I mean, there have been talks, but just hard talks.
Yes, indeed. Talking of reforms in the UN system, the most important reform, naturally, is the reform of the UN Security Council. And a number of countries support India's becoming a permanent member. But would China give its support? In fact, that is the basic hurdle. So even if this issue is discussed at the BRICS forum, I don't think it's going to serve any use because China will do as it pleases when it comes to reforming the UN Security Council. In other words, it will do everything possible to veto India getting a permanent membership.
Till how long?
Always.
Till how long?
As long as it can. As long as it can. That's in China's genes. And it's very difficult to supplant that with anything else. But of course, it's a quest we can't give up because I think it's India's right to get a permanent membership of the UN Security Council. And we should just keep striving, and who knows, a day may come when China would not be in a position to continue to obstruct India's efforts in this regard. You know, nothing lasts forever. Everything will pass. And this present arrangement in the multilateral system also will pass. What is very evident is that India's relevance is increasing.
That is the main talking point.
India is being seen as a real champion of the interests of the global South. India is not putting countries in debt, which China has been doing. India is more sincere when it comes to interacting with less affluent countries.
And there's no trust deficit with it.
There's no trust deficit. So, as I said, everything will pass. China's hold on this particular issue will perhaps end. and we have to be patient, we have to keep striving.
Well, Dr. Swasti Rao is smiling to that.
No, well, I mean, I'm smiling precisely because, well, I think it is very good to be hopeful, and end of the day,
considering we have a bilateral.
I mean, yeah, of course. So the bilateral, of course, is a product of long, I would say, years and long hours of negotiation and discussion of so many rounds of talks. But the point that we need to remember also is that one needs to have a proportional response to these kind of developments, right? I mean, you cannot be way too optimistic or way too pessimistic. If you carefully heard what the Foreign Secretary said, I mean, ultimately, these kind of decisions have to be then implemented on the ground. Right now, we're talking about disengagement, which means that the troops are going to go back, but then it's still not de-escalation. But what is something more important that we often not talk about when we're discussing this issue is that in the last 4 years after 2020, April, when the Galwan had happened, in these last 4 years, China has also ramped up infrastructure development in that area in a way that it doesn't really matter too much, right, if Chinese were to go back a little, because 4 years ago there was not so much infrastructure development. So end of the day, this is just one step forward, and we must obviously applaud it. But like I said, that strategic caution is the need of the hour. I wouldn't read too much into it, apart from the fact that yes, we need to be talking. We have a lot of trade. We have a lot of, I would say, also investments, for example, that we are looking forward to. And end of the day, China is a neighbor, right? We have to coexist. So we have to find out ways to coexist in a manner that doesn't really compromise India's national interests. So that's what we are doing. But just to the other thing about China allowing India to become a member of the UNSC, I think the problem out there is also, and I would be very frank in calling out, is actually the Communist Party of China. So if you actually envisage a time when perhaps China could also become relatively more democratic and perhaps starts to look at the world in a different manner and not with the same wolf warriorism that it is looking at ever since 2013 at least, of course, I mean, one wouldn't be so rigid as to say that it can never happen, but it's very less likely to happen because, it is not something which is about China's interests.
Sometimes one has to also take with a pinch of salt the voices of support which we get from the other P5 members. It's simply this: if you are occupying a seat of power and authority, you want to make sure that not too many others get that seat. So I take all these voices of support and expressions of how India deserves to be there from the other P5 members with a certain degree of pinch of salt, because of the fact that I will only see how sincere they are when actually we have to come to cross the river.
Okay, coming back to the BRICS scheme of things now. The current BRICS grouping under the chairmanship of Russia, where President Putin may not want to talk about it directly, but then we have talked about that if needed, India is there to assist. Can this BRICS actually influence and shift the world order because of what's happening in the West and what's happening as far as Russia and Ukraine is concerned?
Is that question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'll take that to the Greg also.
To some extent, that is already happening. The West doesn't really count for as much as it used to. The economies of many Western countries are in decline. Many European countries are going through a difficult time financially. Whereas on the other hand, Eastern countries are beginning to do well. Look at ASEAN countries. Look at the growth of India itself. China, of course. So, in some senses, that focus is already shifting. Now, we never want, as a country which has multi-alignment as its policy, we don't want to antagonize anybody. We want to have relations with as many countries which benefit us and which benefit them. So our approach really is that we want to maximize the gains for both sides. So in that sense, we will continue to have close relations with as many of the Western countries on all fronts, including, for instance, cooperation in economic issues or even defense issues. We have diversified our sources of imports for our defense requirements, and that is because we tend to now see that more and more countries want to be a friend of India.
Okay.
That is very important.
Let me take this to Greg. More and more countries want to be the friends of India. And well, talking about the more and more countries in the BRICS settings, they want to be friend of India. They want to be aligned to India for reasons, for their own regional aspirations. How do you look at this?
Well, yes, I mean, India's got an increasingly large footprint in global affairs. And I mean, its clout is growing. So, of course, they want to align with India for the benefits that brings, both economic and geopolitical. So you've got different reasons. It can be balancing against China, for example, or you can look at the West who are trying to use India against Russia. So it's for different reasons, but it's one which I think will only continue to increase as India develops further and further. And of course, I mean, its current foreign policy of being a friend to all and an enemy to none is going to pay dividends in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And since you've mentioned that, what about addressing the elephant in the room? I'm sure you heard the discussions we had in the studio on China. How do you see that?
Well, yes. I mean, the elephant in the room, I'm used to engaging in that. I think, India needs to be very careful in its engagement, because one of the things that are clear is that the US has been trying to exploit the tensions between India and China, which BRICS is trying to heal for its own geopolitical benefit. So if you want to use the term, I mean, India needs to be careful it doesn't become Ukrainianized against China, because the US is not a continental power. India is. And so therefore there is always this potential, this kind of temptation.
Okay, these are the live visuals, Greg. I'm sorry, okay, these are not the live visuals, Greg. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. These are the visuals earlier today. Remember, as we speak, the chair of the 16th BRICS Summit, Russia, the Russian president is hosting the BRICS leaders for dinner, and it's an opening ceremony for the opening ceremony of the BRICS leaders at Kazan. This is once again the way President Putin according a very warm handshake to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Well, they had the first formal meeting today, followed by the second rendezvous face-to-face as he welcomes Prime Minister Modi. And most importantly, Swasti, I just want quickly your take on it.
Sure.
Well, this is the second meeting in the last 3 months. In the last 10 years, 7 times they have met. So there is already this bonhomie. Whatever is happening in the rest of the world is one thing, but then the two leaders and the way Russia looks up to India. And I think that was something which was also mentioned in President Putin's opening remarks, that Russia attaches tremendous amount of significance to its ties with India. Very quickly.
Well, so very quickly, indeed, Russia-India relations are a constant in a very fluid world. I mean, this has been iterated by the Foreign Affairs Minister. This is something that we come back to again and again. Now, it doesn't mean that they are, they are stagnant. They are also evolving, but they are evolving in a very, I would say, consistent, constant fashion. And I think one of the things that we definitely should be mentioning is that this very successful bilateral that Prime Minister Modi has had with President Putin, where we just learned that after Prime Minister's visit, then Raksha Mantri is going to be traveling to Russia to actually get the INS The Shield, which has been one of the 4 stealth frigates that we placed an order for in 2016, the next being Tamal. And, these 2 are going to be made in Kaliningrad, and the rest, of the remaining 2 are going to be made in Goa. So I think this is also somewhere a reiteration that even though India has diversified away from Russian weapons, and Russia is obviously facing the heat in the the war in Ukraine, because so much of flesh and effort is there. But at the same time, Russia is still having the capability to sort of deliver India on its promises. That's one part. The other important part is about, for example, how the Russia-India, trade has evolved now to new, new arenas, and the case in point here being the oil trade. Because if you look at, last couple of months' data, you'll see that it's already reached more than 1.9 million barrels per day. And obviously, because of this, there are challenges, because the trade deficit has also grown. Suddenly there's been so much of a jump in bilateral trade. But at the same time, the kind of centrality that Russia has now started to play in India's energy security was never really ever there.
I was coming to that. On Energy Cooperation, Ambassador Dayal, would you like to come in here between India and Russia? We did have that bit coming up in the presser also, the discussions, how they are aggressively moving forward on the nuclear power plant, and how the concerned departments are constantly in touch with each other.
Well, there is a lot of scope for widening contacts in the energy sector. Russia has been cooperating and assisting us in regard to nuclear energy projects for quite some time. Of course, in recent years, India's purchases of crude oil from Russia have become very important. And of course, the increased purchases happened because of the sanctions of the West. Now, Russia will not be able to normalize relations with Western countries for quite some time, in the foreseeable future. And at the same time,
but will
India's
it need India
requirements.
to ease this out? Will it needs, and it will needs rather, India's help to ease the friction?
Eventually, perhaps.
Yes, eventually.
Yes. And that's what President Putin realized.
But if we can widen our relations with Russia, and this is what the Russians themselves want. I followed with great interest President Putin's remarks to foreign media in Kazan a couple of days ago. And he referred to 3 specific areas where he sees the possibilities of great cooperation between Russia and India. One was the automobile sector. The second was the pharmaceutical sector. And the third, believe it or not, was the film industry. He said that's also an industry. And he gave some very interesting information that in Russia there is a television channel which airs Indian films 24 hours a day. So there can be a lot of scope for widening people-to-people contacts in that sense, and increasing the level of popular understanding of India in Russia. And incidentally, he also said at the Moscow Film Festival this year, Indian films are going to be showcased. So if there is a scope of widening contacts in any area, whether it's the energy sector, whether it is through importing more crude oil, or using Russian assistance in the nuclear energy sector, or continuing to use Russian military supplies, because Russia is still a very big supplier to us in that sense. And Professor Rao mentioned about the tanker, that the aircraft vessel that is going to come to us. But the point is, at the moment, Russia is feeling the heat on account of the sort of relations that it is having with Western countries. And it is looking for other partners. India is emerging.
And that's where India comes in more.
India comes
okay,
in more.
Let's take this to Greg. Greg, your thoughts? It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, the point is, from a Russian perspective, they don't see any relations with the West in the near future. The West has burnt its bridges.
Okay, interesting.
So what they do is they see the West as an unreliable, well, not even a partner, but one that does not keep its word, goes back on promises and uses economic warfare. They have never treated Russia as an equal. And this is something that sticks in the Russian mind.
And that's where India comes in under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. And as you speak, I must tell you, we are playing those visuals of, can we go back to those visuals, please? President Putin warmly once again welcoming Prime Minister Modi to this official dinner with a very, very warm handshake. Please go ahead, Greg.
So, okay, I mean, from these visuals, I mean, you can see, I mean, we're talking mostly at the state-to-state level, but you can see between Putin and Modi that they have a genuine reciprocal and relational understanding and respect for each other. And this differs because if you look at how the Western leaders interact even with each other, it is very transactional, it is very stiff. So you've got this other dimension beyond the state, but also this individual level. And I mean, I mean, the Indian diaspora in Russia, I mean, it's everywhere. So, and as has been mentioned, I mean, Bollywood is popular on TV, and I remember even in the mid-90s they were showing Bollywood too, so it's been something which you've got this cultural dimension. So there are so many different ways of interaction between Russia and India. It's much more solid, meaningful than anything which is possible with the West.
Greg, I would request you to please stay with us, and we will just for a moment shift our focus to the other important bilateral that took place between India's Prime Minister with the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit earlier today. These are the visuals of earlier today, where both leaders reviewed the full range of relationship between Iran and India, wherein they also discussed ways to deepen ties in futuristic sectors. Ambassador Tayal, let's talk a bit about India's role here, and I think that is also something which came up in the presser. As far as the West Asia conflict is concerned, and the timings just coincided, Prime Minister Modi meeting the Iranian president, so there India's role.
Well, I served in Iran 3 decades ago.
That's exactly why I asked you this question.
I must tell you that the Iranians value India as a friend. Now, they are going through a very difficult situation. There are, of course, Western sanctions on them, which are hurting them greatly. Iranian oil supplies have been banned because of these sanctions. China is, of course, profiting from that because China is buying almost all the oil that Iran is exporting. But at the same time, this very dangerous situation relating to the conflict in the Middle East is something that the Iranians are very badly trapped into. They are sucked into this conflict and they would like to get out of it. They have tried to send as many messages as possible that they don't want an escalation, because the escalation will harm them greatly. It will not only enable Israel to come and hit them hard, but the United States might also join Israel and seize this opportunity to try and wreak as much devastation on Iran as possible. So the Iranians don't want escalation. And who can help them in this sort of a situation? They see India as possibly a country which can help in the de-escalation of the Middle East conflict. And I must say that we on our part have tried to widen our cooperation with Iran. The Chabahar port and our investment there is one example. But at the same time, and I'll be honest about it, the Iranian side has to show more consideration to our sensitivities. I must say that most of us in India who analyze relations with Iran were not at all happy when the Supreme Leader said that you can't be a true Muslim unless you are sensitive to the sufferings of, some Muslims. So there are some issues which come up. So both sides have to show nuanced understanding. They have to show awareness to sensitivities, and there is the scope for cooperation is indeed very vast.
How significant is this meeting on the sidelines of BRICS?
Yeah, so very quickly, of course, I mean, we are living in a very dangerous world, and there is an unabated war happening in Ukraine. Of course, and just as we were grappling with all the 3F crises, which is food, fuel and fertilizer crises from the Ukraine war, there's the Hamas happened to attack Israel on October 7, and then the rest is history. But I think what we need to understand, and what I think the Iranians and Israelis, everybody needs to understand there, is that, nobody wants a direct confrontation. Nobody really has the capabilities. Okay, they have the capabilities to launch an attack, but then that is different from actually sustaining an attack, because then you also have to have capabilities for the counter strikes from the other side. And from Israel's perspective, it cannot do that without US support and direct involvement. Obviously, US doesn't want to do that because there are elections around the corner.
Right.
But very quickly, the thing is that it affects India in two ways. One is that Israel has also emerged as a very important strategic partner for India. If you'll see the defense exports, that Israel is doing to us, it's now more than 13% in a very, very short period of time. So I think the Israeli, the modus operandi out there is to not really directly attack Iran. I mean, everybody understands these are political statements, but to weaken the access of proxies, which is Hamas, Hezbollah and Houthis. And if Iran also wishes to walk the talk, I mean, those financial flows and the weapon flows, etc., have to stop somewhere. So I think those are things which are really beyond the ambit of what India's immediate interests are there, because of course India, doesn't really recognize any dialogue mechanisms with Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas. And the other thing, Sakal, which is very important, is that there is a part in the West Asian crisis which is directly impacting India, which is the Red Sea situation. Because if you remember, almost a month after the Hamas attack on Israel, the Red Sea basically became a no-go zone for any non-Russian or non-Chinese ships, including Indian ships, which had to reroute all the way through the Cape of Good Hope. And that is from where the trade is still going, which has resulted in a 200% increase in freight and insurance and all that. So, of course, it is in India's interest to sort of de-escalate. Whether India has direct capabilities to do that, I'm not sure, but obviously India is again looked upon as a partner which has good ties with both sides. So I think India finds itself in the same position again and again, and I think India leverages it well. But in terms of really making a difference, I mean, I would have my fingers crossed.
Iran can play a big role in de-escalating the Middle East conflict, because Iran has a great hold on the Hezbollah, the Hamas and the Houthi. And it can help in the negotiations which are being conducted through Egypt, Qatar and the United States. And I think that what India can try and do is to tell Iran to use whatever its efforts and its possibilities are to bring about a peace deal in.
Right. Point taken, sir. In fact, just to have a fair sense of what transpired between the two leaders, the President of Iran and Prime Minister of India, my colleague Jessica, joining us live again from Kazan. Jessica, a bit of an elaboration, first of all, on that bilateral between the two leaders. Jessica.
That's correct. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian met for the first time. Remember, he was recently elected. And with India's development of the Chabahar port, it's certainly significant that the two leaders met. Well, the bilateral meeting focused particularly on the bilateral meeting between them, of course, focused on the issues of West Asia and the conflict taking place there, where Prime Minister reiterated that dialogue and diplomacy is the only way to find a resolution to conflicts like these. And both remain committed to finding, common ground, especially when we talk about the Chabahar port, the deal that was inked some time back. So, of course, taking stock of those issues, and that meeting certainly being very significant today.
Right. Jessica, there were a couple of questions centering around the bilateral of Prime Minister Modi with President Putin, and there was a bit of an elaboration by Foreign Secretary how Prime Minister Modi once again reiterated India's position that the battlefields can never offer solutions, and most importantly that line that India is looking at a possibility or an attempt to gauge the possibility to look for alternative approaches, and India is more than happy to aid and assist if needed, quote unquote. That's important.
That's correct. You heard from the Foreign Secretary saying that India could be an interlocutor.
Okay.
Certainly as an important...
Okay, I think, Jessica, there is again a bit of a technical glitch. We will try and sort that out. But meanwhile, let's just quickly recall some of the important points that were raised in the presser earlier today. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. Okay, Jessica is with us. Yes, we can hear you, Jessica. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
That's correct. The meeting between President Putin. I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question?
You were briefing us about how India. In fact, the meeting between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, how Prime Minister Modi spoke about reiterated India's position on the solutions cannot be offered on the battleground, that India is there to aid and assist when needed, etc. In the context of Ukraine-Russia conflict.
That's correct. I was making a point what the Foreign Secretary said just a short while ago. The fact that India can be an interlocutor and a peacemaker to that extent and also mediate. You saw Prime Minister's engagement with President Putin earlier in July and then a visit to Ukraine, certainly balancing the ties and making sure that India would continue to advance its position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It has maintained the dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward. And of course, this is not an era of war to no solutions are found on the battlefield. So certainly the Prime Minister's reiteration of how India can play an important part when it comes to resolution of such massive conflicts could be an important endeavor to take on.
Okay, Jessica, also a bit of a elaboration on the questions that were specifically pertaining, there were a couple of them rather, pertaining to this bilateral meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi tomorrow. You were there at the presser. Well, it is official that the two sides are meeting tomorrow.
That's correct, Sakal, and that supposedly is one of the biggest highlights.
Yes.
Awaited for tomorrow, the meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. This would be their first bilateral meeting ever since 2020. They have met previously on the sidelines, but no bilateral meeting has taken place. And certainly, a day before, you heard from the Foreign Secretary when the briefing for BRICS Summit had taken place in New Delhi, where he had said that the disengagement was agreed upon, patrolling and grazing points that would reverse the status quo back in 2020. So certainly important developments, but the Foreign Secretary was cautious enough to point out that one will have to wait for the outcomes and more details would be made available tomorrow, and preempting would certainly not be advisable at the moment when it comes to the meeting between the two.
Right. Thank you very much, Jessica Taneja, for joining us live from Kazan in Russia. Thank you. And as Jessica just mentioned about Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri's brief that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping, they will be holding this bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit in Russia's Kazan tomorrow. That's on Wednesday. Let's listen in that bit again.
I can confirm that there will be a bilateral meeting held between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping tomorrow, 23rd of October, on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit.
And on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri also stated that Prime Minister Modi and President Putin exchanged views on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi emphasized that dialogue and diplomacy are the essential ingredients for resolution.
The leaders also shared perspectives on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Prime Minister reiterated that dialogue and diplomacy was the way forward to achieve resolution of the conflict. He briefed President Putin about his engagements with the Ukrainian leadership and noted that India stood ready to contribute in bringing peace to the region.
In fact, as we speak, leaders are gathering in Kazan for the 16th BRICS Summit. On the sidelines of the summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin, he also met the chair of the New Development Bank, or NDB, Dilma Rousseff, for talks. That's the visual, greeting Dilma Rousseff for the talks, the NDB being an important ingredient as far as the multilateral institutions of the BRICS groupings are concerned. And President Putin, we are given to understand, stressed the importance of financial settlements between the BRICS countries in local currencies, saying that it helps to minimize geopolitical risks and free the economic development from politics as well. In fact, the New Development Bank, or NDB, was established in 2015 by the BRICS countries, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in emerging markets and developing countries of the global south. Yes. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of course, he's in Russia to attend the BRICS Summit. DD India's Jessica Taneja, she spoke with these Indian students about their expectations and views on the multilateral engagements at such forums. Let's take a look.
Kazan is home to more than 1,000 Indian students, some studying medicine, others arts and culture. Let's try and speak to a few of them and understand how they've been able to settle in and what they've learned so far. You guys have been here for some time now. What has your experience been like as medical students?
Actually, if medical students, we came here to Kazan to become a doctor. But not only becoming a doctor is only our, it's a profession. But rather than that, when we come to a different country from India, we learn a lot in our life. Because of right now we are in the BRICS Summit. It's like one of the biggest summit in the world. And we are seeing our Prime Minister, not only our Prime Minister, also the greatest leaders of the world.
As Prime Minister has arrived, especially in Kazan, it's like a really great thing for us. And as a student, we would be very happy that our Prime Minister is here and we are able to meet him, greet him, and it's a special thing for us.
India and Russia has always been friends, and I guess it plays a very huge role in us choosing a country. It's safer and our political relations are good, and this summit has intensified the friendship we had.
No, as students, we've been here for nearly 6 years now, and we've been continuously taking part in events like this. And being here in Kazan, we get great opportunities to interact with people like such higher officials, and even seeing our Prime Minister in person.
I think firstly, how we were mentioning earlier, that it has been quite an exposure for students like us, especially being so far away from our home places. No, it speaks volume about the India-Russia relationship, and definitely with the kind of help and the exposure that we have been given by the embassy, and how we are able to participate will definitely, I think, will help us develop our personalities. I think it's a huge boost to the city, our country's relation, and also our personal achievements.
Indian students, more than 1,000 as I pointed out earlier, expectations from the Prime Minister's visit were also feeling that they're in an electrifying atmosphere right here in Kazan, something the city hasn't been seeing for the recent past.
Okay, let's once again continue to have this discussion with our guests on this special broadcast. Ambassador Prabhu continues to be with us, former senior diplomat. I take this opportunity once again to welcome Swasti Rao. Dr. Swasti Rao, thank you for staying. And also Greg Simons, Associate Professor from Turku University in Latvia, joining us live from Sweden. Greg, you've been quiet for some time. Let me come to you first. Let's talk about the significance of this BRICS under the chairmanship of Russia at the time when the world is talking about Russia-Ukraine conflict, at the time that the conflict has literally intensified the bloc politics, at a time when there is a lot of talk about isolating Russia further and further. Well, it's a different question whether it impacts Putin or not. And at that particular juncture, he is hosting this event with more members wanting to join in and groupings expansion taking the center stage. What does this BRICS mean for Putin, President Putin?
Well, it means that the rules-based order is not the one in charge of international relations anymore. In spite of all their attempts to isolate, weaken and contain Russia, I mean, they even talked about this, Rand, in a paper in 2019, how to overstretch Russia, including in Ukraine. So, I mean, they've been trying this for a while. It's not working. And trying different things in Russia itself. I mean, even during the presidential elections in March. But, I mean, his popularity increases because he's seen as one who stands up for Russia and Russians and their interests. So, I mean, he's as strong as ever. The Russian military is the strongest and biggest it's been since the 1980s. The economy is not doing badly, especially compared to these Western economies. I mean, Sweden's economy is in tatters. Germany, well, we shouldn't even talk about that.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it's not working as intended. The Global South retains its independence and sovereignty, and Russia is a key part of that.
And what do you make of the new members, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and UAE? Greg?
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, this once more, I mean, this comes down to BRICS as being an inclusive and peaceful organization because, I mean, you had China, which negotiated the resolution to a long conflict which the US had been driving between Saudi Arabia and Iran, for example. And you have these countries, I mean, Saudi Arabia not so long ago was considered a staunch ally of the United States in West Asia. And now you can see that UAE and Saudi Arabia are seeking to protect their own interests, their own sovereignty, and they attempt to do this through BRICS.
Okay. Ambassador Dayal, your thoughts? To the first question that I asked Greg about what does and how important is this BRICS for President Putin?
How important is the BRICS summit?
Yes.
Certainly,
hosting.
it's very important. You know, Russia is
given the timings.
Very tough times. The war against Ukraine has certainly cost Russia heavy.
Sanctions.
And there are questions whether its international stature has been reduced on account of this war. So, the BRICS summit gives President Putin an opportunity to showcase his leadership qualities and the fact that he means well towards other countries. He's sending out messages of cooperation. The very fact, as you highlighted, that so many countries want to become members of BRICS shows that they don't distrust Russia. And we, for one, have been very emphatic in saying that it is necessary to find a solution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And this message has gone down well, not just with Russia, but with other countries too. I may mention that no diplomatic solution is possible without give and take.
Okay.
And certainly, both sides, Russia and Ukraine, will have to find a formula of giving and taking and bringing about peace. You know, Ukraine
India figures out in that formula. So
Ukraine has suffered so much, and if the war continues, it will continue to suffer. And for what? For one thing, it wanted to become a member of Ukraine, of the NATO. Is it worth so much to make your people go through so much of suffering? I think it's necessary to think deep and find workable solutions. Now, let me go back to Iran 1 minute.
Sure.
If Iran gets involved in a full-scale war, then certainly all the hopes that we had of bilateral cooperation in terms of our investments, you know, we were very serious about investing in Iran. That's why the Chabahar port project was financed by us. And we were really keen to have the international North-South corridor running through Iran, Afghanistan, Central Asia, and going on to Russia, because we thought it would be beneficial to all these countries. But if Iran gets involved in a full-scale war, then all these hopes of working together with Iran on such projects will be dashed. So I think the BRICS meeting gives us an opportunity to have meetings on the sidelines with countries like Russia, with countries like Iran, to see how we further cooperation. Now, the meeting with Xi Jinping, which will take place tomorrow, is very interesting. And in that context, I think a lot of people are of the view that the timing of the understanding that we have reached on de-escalation is significant because it clears the atmosphere for holding such talks. Now, of course, a lot remains to be seen what happens on the ground at the border that the military will see. But in any case, this meeting can further help in the normalization process at the line of actual control. And certainly, we want good relations with China. We want trade to flow. We want to have a stronger economic relationship. It will benefit both sides. This distrust has to first be removed, and perhaps the meeting tomorrow
and this is the
between
first
two leaders
step
could help
in that direction.
Yes.
Swasti, first step in that direction.
Well, as far as China is concerned, yes, it is a first step in that direction. But you know, I mean, if we have learned anything from our history with China, it has taught us to be, be very, very strategically cautious and not really take things on face value. Because in the previous,
we are not preempting.
Yeah, so we are not preempting that, as it was very
meeting,
clear by the foreign secretary's, remarks as well. But I think I would support the fact that these groupings such as BRICS, for example, they also show on the one hand that I mean, from India's perspective, of course, we were just discussing that we cannot take our eyes away from the fact that China is actually the one that is benefiting the most. You look at any conflict in the world, any war in the world, it's basically China that benefits. But having said that, I think from India's perspective, it is important that we do not believe in a zero-sum format of diplomacy. We believe diplomacy to be collaborative. And platforms like BRICS, are basically a reiteration of that fundamental worldview that for India, having ties with the West, India thinks that the world has enough place for everybody. The world should not really be dominated by a set of countries alone or a set of, ideologies alone. And that is a fundamental reflection. Our strategic caution, of course, is something that we all need to basically live up to, have. And the other thing is that from Russia's perspective, I think it is important because we have seen that even 3 years of war has not been able to diplomatically isolate Russia like the West had wanted. There are certain structural reasons for that. We also have to be very aware of how far the Russia-China strategic alignment is deepening, because of course we need to be very realistic about that. And one of the reasons why we keep engaging in these multilateral forums, for example, BRICS or SCO, is also because we want to maintain, that sense of balance with Russia, because we would not want Russia to be completely pushed with China. Okay. And that remains, I think, a very important strategic aspiration for India.
So, Greg, one final question to you. India is that voice that will bring, or that perhaps brings, the sense of balance here today, since in the context of BRICS and the new aspiring nations that are wanting to align with the BRICS, your thoughts? Final word, rather.
Yeah, well, definitely. India has an interesting role, not only contemporarily, but also historically, because, it has this legacy of this non-aligned movement. So we're talking about this neutrality, or at least non-alignment in military terms. And in this regard, India plays a very important role within BRICS as a balancer between those different larger powers, such as Russia, China, and so forth. So its role is critical, and I think it's also one which is absolutely necessary to keep BRICS as this open not against anyone, and this status to welcome and not to weaponize it against any one country or blocks of countries.
Right. On that note, Greg Simons, thank you very much for joining us live from Sweden. Also thanking Ambassador Prabhu Dayal in our Delhi studio, along with, of course, thanking Dr. Swasti Rao also in our Delhi studio. That's all we have for you on this special broadcast, India at BRICS. Thank you very much for tuning in to DT India. Today was the day one. We, of course, will continue our coverage from Kazan tomorrow. That is Wednesday as well, as far as the 16th BRICS Summit under chairmanship of Russia is concerned. And most importantly, Prime Minister Modi of India and his engagements at Kazan. But that's for tomorrow. As of now, from me and my entire team of DD India, thanks for tuning into special broadcast. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.